As you know, the Shabbat that we have ahead of us between, I should say, the Shabbat prior to Rosh Hashana that we have ahead of us, this week we read Parshat Nitzavim. What's interesting is that the Shabbos that always exists between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is referred to, as you know, as Shabbat Shuvah. But yet, Parshat Nitzavim is actually referred to as the Parsha of Shuvah. Why? Well, if you look in Parshat Nitzavim, this week's Parsha, you find two interesting mentions of the concept of Shuvah, of returning. First of all, Torah tells us, Ki ha-mitzvah hazot asher anochi mitzavcha hayom lo nifleiti mimcha v'lo rechoka hi. That this mitzvah, it's a hidden mitzvah, doesn't disclose what it is. Torah tells us that it is not far from us. It's achievable. Lo b'shamayim. It's not in the heavens. Lo be'ever hayam. It's not on the other side of the water. And the Ramban tells us that this mitzvah is the mitzvah of tshuva, the mitzvah of repentance. But not only that, but earlier in the parsha, Torah tells us that when all these brachot and all these klalot come to you, you're going to return to your heart. You're going to return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it mentions the concept and the idea of return 7 times. 7 times it talks about Shuva, returning, talks about the mitzvah hazot, the mitzvah of Shuva, all found in the parsha of Shuva, the parsha of returning, that being Parsha Nitzavim. And if I may, I'd even suggest that the quirk in the calendar this year, that happens often, where Parsha Nitzavim is actually found before Rosh Hashanah, allows for a Parsha of Shuva, Parsha of returning, and a Parsha or Shabbat of Teshuvah, of repentance, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Because, of course, the Parsha of Teshuvah encompasses the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and this Parsha focuses on returning. Now, what's interesting is that when the Torah talks about this idea of returning, it makes it seem that it's not so simple. Compares it to perhaps being something that's hard to reach, hard to achieve. And of course, we understand because this mitzvah hazot that it refers to talks about going back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, talks about reconnecting to mitzvot, talks about finding ways to achieve that which had been lost previously. And of course, we know that this mitzvah of teshuvah, of what we call repentance, is in fact challenging and not as easy as we might think. However, Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook has a unique interpretation, where Rav Kook writes in Orot HaTshuva that when we speak about tshuva, what we speak about is returning to the collective. Yes, obviously there's an element of Torah and mitzvot associated with it, but the shuva, the returning, as opposed to the repentance aspect, is returning to the klal, returning to the groups that we were once a part of. What does that mean? So Rav Kook explains that as we develop as individuals and as we grow, we go through a process where we actually isolate ourselves and even sometimes alienate ourselves from others. And to return, therefore, means to return to the collective, to the community, to the klal. Rav Kook says that no tshuva is possible until we connect to the community. And I thought it was a fitting Torah thought to sort of begin and introduce this program with, because in many ways we are incredibly excited to reconnect as a community. I don't need to tell you how COVID has created fissures and separations and divisiveness within our community. That we all know. But obviously for safety and security reasons, we've had to spend much of the last year and a half isolated and alone and separate. And while we're still nervous about safety and security and doing everything, of course, that we can to protect our students, our faculty, and our entire community, we are excited to try our best to once again come together, each school by itself, but each school as its own cohort. And we are excited about the prospects of coming together again as a community, hopefully experiencing Shabbatonim together, hopefully experiencing so much of what has been missed, all as a community. And that's our hope and that's our prayer as we enter into the Rosh Hashana Yomim Noraim season, that we are blessed with a year of health, of success, of happiness, in which we come together as an Or Chaim, as an Olpana, as a Bnei Akiva Schools community, and make the most out of the opportunities given to us for what will hopefully be a meaningful year.